There's a movie where a song comes on a small-town radio station for the first time, and everyone who hears it stops whatever they're doing and starts running. That Thing You Do came out in 1996, and that moment is still the most joyful 90 seconds in the film. Tom Hanks wrote it, directed it, and played the smooth record label man who shows up with a briefcase and turns four kids from Pennsylvania into a one-hit wonder, and then watches the whole thing dissolve in a single summer. Tom Everett Scott was Guy, the drummer whose smile when the song first hits the radio is the reason people rewatch this film. Liv Tyler was Faye, who stays loyal to the wrong person for two-thirds of the film and makes you feel every minute of it. Jonathan Chaich was Jimmy, the guy you recognize because every band has one, and you've never quite forgiven yours. Steve Zahn was Lenny, the guitarist who kisses a cardboard cutout of the band and the camera catches it falling over in slow motion, and somehow that's the funniest thing in the film. The film cost $26 million and earned just over $33 million worldwide. Critics were polite but not excited. Tom Hanks said it petered out, and then something happened. The VHS generation found it, then their kids found it on cable, then their kids found it streaming. The soundtrack went platinum 25 years after release. The director of La La Land used it as a compatibility test when falling in love with his wife. Today we're getting into 15 facts you didn't know about That Thing You Do. The accidental song submitted under a fake name, the casting near-disaster Rita Wilson personally fixed. The actress discovered mid-tantrum at a bank, the hidden name nobody noticed for 30 years, and the lead singer whose real life turned into a version of the character he played. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies we grew up on. Now let's get into it with number 15. Number 15, Celebrity Halloween. Accidentally created That Thing You Do. It was the mid-1990s and Tom Hanks was trick-or-treating in Georgetown with Sean Penn, Robin Wright, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Their kids were running on the sidewalk. Schwarzenegger was rushing everyone along saying, "Come on, hurry up, you snooze, you lose." Standard Terminator energy applied to candy collection. Somewhere between houses, Penn told Hanks he should direct. Penn had just made The Indian Runner and told him every actor should try it at least once, just to understand how hard the job actually is. That conversation stuck. By then, Hanks was in the middle of the most successful year of his career, back-to-back Oscars for Philadelphia and Forrest Gump, and he was about to spend the better part of a year doing nonstop press for Gump around the world. He'd later tell Deadline he started writing just to stay sane. "I had talked about myself for a year straight, so I started writing to maintain some sort of creative sanity." He wrote the script for That Thing You Do in 30 days, flat, on planes, in hotel rooms, in the back of press cars between interviews. And 20th Century Fox agreed to make it the moment he agreed to appear in it. Here's the thing about that. Tom Hanks didn't write this film because he had a burning directorial vision he'd been suppressing for decades. He wrote it because he was bored of himself. Because a Halloween in Georgetown with the guy from Terminator and the guy from Dead Man Walking happened to land at the right moment. The warmest, most uncynical film of 1996 was a byproduct of celebrity trick-or-treating. Number 14. Tom Hanks gave Jimmy Nicole the ending he never got. In June 1964, a barber in London reshaped a stranger's hair into a Beatles mop top in a single afternoon because the most famous band in the world needed a drummer by morning. That stranger was Jimmy Nicole, and Tom Hanks couldn't get him out of his head for 30 years. Here's what happened. June 1964, the Beatles are 24 hours from launching their first world tour when Ringo Starr collapses with tonsillitis. Manager Brian Epstein panics, calls producer George Martin, and they land on a session drummer named Jimmy Nicol. By evening, Nicole is at Abbey Road rehearsing. The next night, he is on stage in Copenhagen as a Beatle. He played 8 shows. Then Ringo recovered, flew to Melbourne, and the tour went on without Nicole. Epstein drove him to the airport, pressed a gold watch into his hand, engraved "To Jimmy with appreciation and gratitude" from the Beatles and Brian Epstein, June 1964. And that was it. Nicole sat alone at the airport and waited for a flight back to a life that had already moved on. Within a year, he was bankrupt. His wife left him. He eventually disappeared so completely that decades later, his own son, when Paul McCartney asked to reach him, simply said no. The last confirmed sighting of Nicole was outside a rented flat in North London in the early 2000s. At one point, his son wasn't sure whether his father was alive or dead. Tom Hanks had first heard Nicole's story as a 7-year-old following the Beatles' world tour. He said it stuck in his mind for the next 3 decades. What was it like to be that guy? That question is the entire engine of That Thing You Do. Hanks just gave the story a happier ending than the real one got. Number 13, the fake 1964 hit that became real. The movie needed a song, not just any song, the song. The one that the entire story would hinge on, played 11 times across 108 minutes, nominated for an Academy Award, and required to sound like a genuine 1964 British invasion hit while being written in 1995. No pressure. The studio opened submissions to songwriters and received over 300 entries. Tom Hanks wrote one, Marshall Crenshaw wrote one. Members of Squeeze and They Might Be Giants wrote one each. Jim Lauderdale submitted a countrified version that by all accounts was excellent and absolutely wrong. Adam Schlesinger heard about the call through friends at his publishing label Polygram. His band Fountains of Wayne hadn't released their debut album yet. He figured a Tom Hanks project was worth a couple of days of effort and wrote 3 versions of the same song as a personal exercise. He didn't think he had a shot. He called his friend Mike Viola to sing the demo. Viola had recently lost his wife and was, in his own words, really depressed. He showed up to the session hungover and smoking. He sang the lead vocal in essentially one take, a little raspy, a little wobbly, and entirely perfect. They labeled the tape Scientist Alexis, a made-up band name, so it would be judged anonymously, and sent it in. It was the second or third song Tom Hanks heard out of 300. He put it at the top of the pile. It never moved. When Viola later found out that Crenshaw, the guys from Squeeze, and They Might Be Giants had all entered and lost, he said, "I didn't know that everyone was trying to do that. I was like, wow, so we are the ones that did it. That's so cool." Number 12. The Oscar-nominated voice credited after The Animal Wrangler. Every time you watch Jonathan Chaitch perform in that movie, every note, every vocal run in That Thing You Do, every line of Little Wild One, every moment of All My Only Dreams, that's not Chaitch. That's Mike Viola. Chaitch practiced with a vocal coach. He attended church services on Sunday mornings to build enough confidence to convincingly mime in front of a camera. His stated goal was simple: to look like he could sing. The film was so committed to the fiction of the Wonders as a real band that Viola's contribution was buried in the end credits under additional vocals, below first aid, below catering, and specifically below animal supplied by. Viola raised this. The producers explained that the mythology required his invisibility. They also pointed out he'd been paid, which apparently closed the conversation. The man whose voice is the entire reason this movie works is credited after The Animal Wrangler. Scroll to the end titles and look for yourself. And here's the kicker: Viola didn't even want to do it. Adam Schlesinger had to drag him into the session. Viola was in a dark place and kept saying no. Schlesinger's argument, more or less, was that Tom Hanks was involved and it might be cool. Number 11, Charlize Theron was discovered in a bank line. In 1994, Charlize Theron arrived in Los Angeles from South Africa on a one-way ticket with $500 and no connections. She went to a bank to cash the check. The teller refused. Out-of-state check, non-American citizen. Theron made a scene. A talent manager named John Crosby was standing in line, watched the entire thing, walked over, and handed her his card. That card led directly to 3 uncredited seconds in Children of the Corn 3, and then to That Thing You Do, only her second credited film role. On the very first day Tom Hanks auditioned actors, Theron walked in, read for the part she was called in for, and then told him she wanted the other one. She was up for Tina, Guy's girlfriend, the smaller role. She wanted Faye, the emotional center of the film. Hanks's thought, in his own words from The Ringer's oral history, "You're too much of a supernova to play Faye." He cast her as Tina. He wrote in her copy of the script, "No matter what, I will always claim to have discovered you." Ed Saxon, one of the producers, remembered the room after her audition. "Gentlemen, we just met a movie star." 7 years later, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for Monster. First Oscar nomination, first win, first South African actor to win in that category. Number 10, The drummer Hanks almost didn't cast because he looked like him. Tom Everett Scott had done one episode of Law and Order and one episode of Grace Under Fire before auditioning for That Thing You Do. He read well, then a week went by with no call. The reason? Tom Hanks thought he looked too much like a younger version of himself and worried audiences would read it as vanity casting. The role was nearly handed to someone else from a candidate pool that included Billy Crudup, Ed Norton, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Luke Wilson. Rita Wilson fixed it. Hanks showed her the audition tape. She told him to cast the guy. He did. And then before certain takes, he'd lean over and say, "Don't do it like me." The crew nicknamed Scott Tom Jr. Wilson's reasoning, captured in the oral history, was straightforward. She thought he was cute. Now here's where it gets strange in a way nobody planned. A few years before all of this, Tom Everett Scott took his girlfriend on a first date to the movies to see Forrest Gump. That girlfriend is the woman he married in December of 1997, a year after That Thing You Do came out. His first date with his future wife was to see the Tom Hanks film that Hanks was promoting when he wrote the script for the movie Scott almost wasn't in, directed by the man whose wife thought Scott was cute enough to hire. Scott said the experience of playing Guy Patterson, a young man suddenly swept into fame and disorientation in his first film, mirrored his own experience, making it almost exactly. "It was paralleling my experience," he told Us Weekly. Being an actor and Guy's experience with being a musician and just going right to the top, it was a whirlwind. Tom Hanks's fingerprints were on Scott's life before Scott ever walked into the audition. Nobody planned that either. Number 9, That Thing You Do's strangest disaster involved a duck. Ethan Embry was 16 years old during production. He found a baby duck on set at the Pomona Fairplex. He named it Salvador Ducky. He began feeding Salvador by placing his own mouth directly over the duck's beak. If you're already wincing, you should be. When filming moved locations, Embry left Salvador in the care of his little sister. She gave the duck a bath in a container. The duck couldn't climb out. Salvador Ducky did not survive the bath. Embry received this news while dressed in his full red band costume, the bright red suit the Wonders wear during the tour sequence. There was no second costume. The grief that followed was immediate and gastrointestinal. Embry soiled the suit on set. Costume designer Colleen Atwood, who has won 4 Academy Awards for Chicago, Memoirs of a Geisha, Alice in Wonderland, and Fantastic Beasts, rinsed the suit by hand. She used a blow dryer. She handed it back. Tom Hanks lent Embry his personal trailer to shower in because it was the only one on set with a shower. Production staff laid cardboard from the trailer door to the bathroom. A doctor arrived that night and diagnosed Embry with dysentery, contracted from the mouth-to-beak feeding technique. Hanks's response, as recalled in The Ringer's oral history, "All I could think was, 'You're 16, aren't you?'" Atwood, for her part, said only, "He's not the first actor in my life that's pooped their pants in costume. A 4-time Oscar winner has seen this before." The unnamed bass player, the character so forgettable the script never gives him a name, gave a baby duck dysentery, soiled a costume, and got hosed down in Tom Hanks's personal trailer. Number 8, the Madonna date behind That Thing You Do. Picture this. It's 1995. Jonathan Scheich is playing the lead singer of a fictional 1964 band, a man perpetually distracted by the idea of something bigger, someone more glamorous, a version of fame the Wonders can't give him. And after the cameras stop rolling, he goes on a date with Madonna. He said in The Ringer's oral history that they got along well and that under different circumstances they probably would have dated properly. He also said he used the experience to stay in character, and when you watch Jimmy on screen, that's not hard to believe. Jimmy neglects Faye. He's always half absent. He can't stop looking toward the exit even when everything he needs is right in front of him. That's a specific kind of distraction, and it requires a specific kind of fuel. Scheich had it. The disorientation of sitting across the table from one of the most famous people alive, the pull of it, the way it makes everything around you feel slightly smaller. And weirdly, it's the most method performance in any Tom Hanks film, sourced from a date that probably felt more surreal than anything he was shooting the next morning. Hanks, for his part, said Scheich came to the audition dressed in a 1964 suit with his hair combed just so, and that he was the only one who sang. The performance, it turns out, started before the cameras did. Jimmy is the most method character in the most unmethodical film Tom Hanks ever made, and the fuel for it was a dinner nobody else knew about. Number 7, the bad review that haunted Tom Hanks for 30 years. Here's the thing about critics and That Thing You Do. In 1996, a reviewer wrote that Tom Hanks has to stop hanging around with veterans of TV because this is just like it's shot on TV and it's not much of anything. That's the review, Hanks read it. And Hanks, the two-time Oscar winner, the most universally beloved actor of his generation, a man who has played a castaway, an astronaut, and Walt Disney, did not forget. In November 2024, nearly 30 years later, Hanks appeared on Conan O'Brien's podcast to promote a new film. O'Brien mentioned that That Thing You Do is now considered a cult classic. What happened next is not what you expect from Tom Hanks. He said, "Let me tell you something about these," and then used a word that Conan immediately confirmed was acceptable on his podcast and would absolutely not be acceptable on this channel. He paused. O'Brien said, "Yes, go ahead." Hanks then described the specific critic who had called the film not much of anything and who had, years later, written a piece calling it a cult classic. Same person, same byline, same exact person, Hanks said. All you need is 20 years between now and then, and it ends up speaking somewhere. He recovered quickly, said it was the carnival, the contest, said he had faith in it. But for a moment, the mask slipped. Tom Hanks, on a comedy podcast in 2024, is still carrying 1996 around. Number 6, Mr. White was named after the forgotten Beatle drummer. Tom Hanks hid something in plain sight for the entire film. His character, the smooth, unreadable record label man who controls the Wonders' fate, is named Mr. White. His first name comes up exactly once, in a single throwaway line. Saul Seiler calls him Andy White. That's not random. Andy White was a Scottish session drummer who, on September 11, 1962, was brought into Abbey Road by producer George Martin to replace Ringo Starr on the Beatles recording of Love Me Do. Martin wasn't satisfied with Ringo's studio playing, so he hired a professional. White played drums. Ringo was handed a tambourine. The version most people know, the one on the Please Please Me album, is Andy White's drumming, not Ringo's. He was paid £5 for the session. He received no royalties. He was, in the most literal sense, the drummer who stepped in and then stepped out. Hanks named his own character after him. In a film about a drummer who steps in for someone else, rises briefly, and then watches everything collapse around him, the manager who orchestrates all of it is secretly named for the session drummer who temporarily replaced the most famous drummer in the world, and then disappeared from the story entirely. Here's the kicker. Nicole replaced Ringo on tour in 1964. Andy White replaced Ringo in the studio in 1962. Mr. White manages a band built around a drummer who replaced someone else in 1964. The whole film is a set of nested replacements, and the man who runs it is secretly named after the one who started it all. Hanks put that in the script and said nothing. Number 5 takes the hidden connections one step further, and this one nobody planned at all. Number 5, the Mr. White connection nobody planned. In 1996, a working TV actor named Bryan Cranston showed up on the set of That Thing You Do to play a small role. Gus Grissom, the real-life astronaut, appearing as a guest on the Hollywood television showcase. It's a blink-and-miss-it cameo. Cranston was known at the time for playing the recurring dentist on Seinfeld. Nobody thought much of it. Tom Hanks noticed. 2 years later, Cranston appeared as Buzz Aldrin in From the Earth to the Moon, Hanks's HBO miniseries about the American space program. Cranston was so good in it that Rolling Stone later called his Buzz Aldrin a nice warm-up for Walter White. That became a pattern. Cranston building a career through exactly this kind of precise, committed work in small spaces. Now here's the part nobody planned. In That Thing You Do, Tom Hanks plays a character named Mr. White, Andy White, as you now know. 12 years later, Bryan Cranston, who played a cameo in that same film, became world famous playing a character also named Mr. White, Walter White, Breaking Bad. Nobody planned this. The two Mr. Whites are in the same film. One of them is Tom Hanks. The other is a bit-part TV actor who would go on to play one of the most iconic characters in television history under the same name. And here's the final layer. Gus Grissom, the astronaut Cranston played in That Thing You Do, died in the Apollo 1 launch pad fire in January 1967, becoming one of the most tragic figures in the American space program. Bryan Cranston, playing a man who died before his time in a film where Hanks plays Mr. White, went on to make Mr. White the most famous character of his career. None of it was intentional, all of it is real. If you watch That Thing You Do, again, and catch Cranston's cameo, which lasts about 15 seconds, just remember you're looking at the future Mr. White in the same frame as the current Mr. White in a film secretly named after a third Mr. White who played drums for the Beatles. Number 4. Tom Hanks built, 1964. From scratch. That Thing You Do is set in the summer of 1964. Not a single note of actual 1964 music plays anywhere in it. Not a B-side, not an obscure deep cut, not a needle drop from anything that existed before 1995. Every song, every jingle, every bar of background music was invented from scratch by a team that included Hanks himself, Adam Schlesinger, Rick Elias, Scott Rogness, Mike Piccirillo, and Gary Gutzman. Part of it was money. Hanks had just come off Forrest Gump, which was wall-to-wall iconic tracks and cost a fortune to license. He told the Seattle Times, "We originally thought we could use obscure B-sides of popular songs, but they all belong to catalogs that are awfully expensive and are difficult to get." But the more interesting reason was creative stubbornness. Hanks made a deliberate decision that the film would not compete with music the audience already had feelings about. No song was going to walk in carrying 30 years of association. Every note would start from zero, his 1964 entirely invented, owing nothing to the real one. That decision put everything on Adam Schlesinger's shoulders. If the song wasn't convincing enough to pass as 1964, the whole premise collapsed. Hanks knew it, Schlesinger knew it. And the hungover demo that 1 out of 300 entries had to carry the entire emotional logic of the film on 2 minutes and 46 seconds of pure invention. The result was a platinum-certified soundtrack. The RIAA awarded that certification in 2021, 25 years after the film's release, representing over 1 million equivalent units sold and streamed in the United States alone. The fictional band in the film peaked at number 2 on the fictional 1964 Billboard Hot 100. The real song peaked at number 41 on the actual 1996 Billboard Hot 100. The real soundtrack went platinum a quarter-century after anyone paid to see the movie in theaters. The film that sounds most authentically like 1964 contains 0 seconds of 1964. Number 3, That Thing You Do, gave Tom Hanks his real studio. 2 years after That Thing You Do came out, Tom Hanks and Gary Gutzman founded a production company. They named it Playtone, after the fictional record label in the film. Same logo, yellow sunburst on a 45 sleeve. They used the same logo. The very first release on the actual Playtone records was the That Thing You Do soundtrack. Since then, Playtone has produced Band of Brothers, The Pacific, John Adams' Big Love, Angels in America, Charlie Wilson's War, Masters of the Air, and Olive Kitteridge, winning 52 Emmy Awards with 107 additional nominations. Hold on. The fake record label from a movie that opened at number 3 lost to The First Wives Club and had critics calling it not much of anything, went on to win 52 Emmys. 52. Every time you see the Playtone title card on one of those productions, every time that snippet of That Thing You Do plays before something serious and acclaim begins, you're watching a fictional label from a 1996 box office disappointment briefly announce some of the most important television America has made. Hanks has said that he considers That Thing You Do the film he's most proud of. Not Philadelphia, not Forrest Gump, not Cast Away. This one, the one that started the company. Forrest Gump gave him the freedom. That Thing You Do is what he did with it, and the fake record label is still playing the song. Number 2, the man who wrote The Joy died on April Fool's Day. Here is what Adam Schlesinger was in 1995, a 28-year-old bass player in a band nobody had heard of, with a publishing deal at Polygram and a reputation among other musicians as someone who understood pop songcraft the way most people understand their native language. Fountains of Wayne had not yet released their debut album. He was not famous. He submitted the song under a fake name because he didn't think it would matter either way. It mattered. He won out of 300 entries. The song peaked at number 41 on the actual Billboard Hot 100, a genuine chart hit in 1996, a year dominated by grunge and hip-hop that had no particular interest in handclap-driven power pop. It was nominated for an Academy Award and a Golden Globe, and the publishing deal that pointed him toward the submission in the first place kicked open a career that ran wide and prolific for the next 24 years. He wrote for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Josie and the Pussycats, A Colbert Christmas, Music and Lyrics. He won 3 Emmys. He was nominated for Tonys and Grammys. Every project he touched had the same quality as that demo, the sense of someone who knew exactly what a song was supposed to do and how to make it do it. In March 2020, at 52 years old, he was placed on a ventilator in a hospital in upstate New York. Tom Hanks, hospitalized with the same virus in Australia, posted from his room, "There would be no Playtone without Adam Schlesinger, without his That Thing You Do. He was a wonder. Lost him to COVID-19. Terribly sad today." Adam Schlesinger died on April 1st, 2020, April Fool's Day. Mike Viola, "A huge piece of me died with Adam." The cast reunited over a video call, their first time together since the Japan press tour, pulled back by grief. The fictional band came back together because the real man who gave them their voice was gone. The most joyful fake song of the decade. The man who wrote it died on the day reserved for jokes. Number 1, Tom Hanks became the one-hit wonder. Here is the fact that reframes everything. That Thing You Do is not Tom Hanks's directorial debut. It's his entire directorial filmography. In the 30 years since 1996, he has written 3 more screenplays. He has produced some of the most acclaimed television in American history. He has acted in more than 20 films. He has won awards, received a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and become the closest thing Hollywood has to a monument. He has directed 1 film, this one. Not a difficult second film that disappointed. Not a passion project that fell apart in development. Not a quiet documentary nobody saw. Nothing. The man who wrote the script in 30 days on a press tour, who named his production company after the fictional record label in it, who called it the film he's most proud of, sat behind the director's chair exactly once and apparently decided that was enough. Think about what that means for everything you just heard. The Halloween sidewalk, Schwarzenegger rushing the candy run, the fake band name, the duck, Charlize Theron's bank tantrum, the Andy White Easter egg. Hanks hid and never mentioned. All of it, the entire architecture of this film exists because Tom Hanks had one directorial moment in him and spent it here. The Wonders had one perfect summer, one song, one shot at something bigger, and then it was over and they went back to their lives. Tom Hanks made one film, one shot at directing, and then he went back to acting. He didn't just write a story about a one-hit wonder, he became one. And That Thing You Do, the film nobody could forget from the director who never made another, is still playing. And there you have it, 15 facts That Thing You Do, about one song, and a fictional band that somehow outlasted almost everything real that came out in 1996. Which of these hit hardest? Tell us in the comments, and tell us which film we should wade into next. Like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.